Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So for this Stephen King video, I will be discussing Stephen King protagonists that are a bit mid. So these are Stephen King characters, protagonists that I don't love, I don't absolutely love, and that I don't absolutely hate. They're just kind of somewhere in the middle. They're a bit meh. So in previous Stephen King videos, I talked about Stephen King protagonists that are either underrated or overrated. So I'll link those two videos down below. In this video, they're kind of not either or. For me personally, this is all, subjective. But for me, these Stephen King characters are just a little mid. I don't love these characters. I don't hate these characters. I don't really often think about these characters. They're just kind of, a bit meh. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So for this first pick, I'm actually going to do a 2-for-1 here. They're in the same book, and they're arguably both the protagonists of the story, at least to start out with. I'm going to be talking about the Tommyknockers with Anderson and Gardner. Both of these protagonists, are a bit meh. I don't often think about them, but I did do a dedicated book review a few months ago, back in October, if you want to go check out my deep thoughts about the book. But anyway, for these two characters and for a lot of these other characters, I think these protagonists, for me, are a bit mid because, one, I don't really love these books. A lot of these books are not my favorites. But also, just they're missing some kind of spark that with great Stephen King characters, they have something that makes them unique and stand out. But for these two protagonists, Anderson and Gardner, yeah, they're fine. They're serviceable. They're not bad. Like when I read this book, they are not the reason that I don't like this book. Except for Gardner with his whole like nuclear power plant rant like that. That is a little bit of annoying. But anyway, like they're not the main reason why I don't like this book. I think the structure is very weak. It's over bloated and the ending isn't very great. So there's a lot of reasons that I don't like this book. The main characters, the protagonists, I don't actively dislike them, but I don't actively love them either. It's not like, oh, I love this book, but this book is just so horribly written. It's just kind of like they're okay. They're not keeping the book afloat either. Like they're not like, oh, these characters are just so good, but the story is so bad. It's just like they're fine, you know. Anyway, they're the first up on this list. Kind of in a similar vein of like this character isn't really that bad or good, but the actual story is just not that great. That would be Bag of Bones. And the protagonist in this one is Mike Newland. And, to start out with, it does start out in a tragic way. I won't spoil anything if you haven't read the book. This is actually one that I do want to go back and reread because I haven't read it in such a long time. But I had the suspicion that I'm still not going to like it. But it does start out in kind of a tragic way with Mike Newland. And I think the beginning of this book is sort of where we get the best of him, because it's like his life is kind of falling apart and you get to see some good character moments out of that. But after that, he's a serviceable main character. He is another writer, which obviously Stephen King at this point is kind of a stereotype for his writing career, because you got, Jack Torrance from The Shining and then a bunch of other people. He at this point he's still doing it, by the way. Like his new books still have writer characters or characters that are writing something. But even by this point, like that trope is just kind of being a little bit redundant. So that is that factor to him. Like it is a bit of a redundant character. He's still serviceable though. Like he's not the reason that I don't like this book. This book just goes into some directions that I don't necessarily love. I think the villain isn't very strong. The supporting cast in the book isn't very good. It's just overall a book that I remember not enjoying. Not because of the main character, but the plot and everything else just isn't that great. He was fine. He was serviceable. But again, he is definitely not a character that I think about a lot. Even trying to remember him, I can't remember a lot of distinct factors with him other than that he's a writer and he has a tragic start. And then some basic plot points of the book. He's just not very memorable, but he's not like actively one of the worst characters Stephen King has ever created. He's just kind of, a bit mid. And kind of along those same lines, definitely one of my least favorite Stephen King books that I can remember is Insomnia. And the main character in here, slipping my mind, I think it's Ralph? Ralph something? Anyway, the main character in here, the most interesting aspect of his life is that he is an elderly man. Stephen King doesn't normally write from the perspective of elderly people, so at this point in his career, it was interesting for him to use that viewpoint because a lot of his writing career, he's writing from like young adults or children or like maybe like middle-aged people. But this one straight up old man. In the beginning of the chapter, something tragic happens. Overall, again, not a character that I can remember a lot, and I don't remember him very fondly. The only distinct thing I can remember about him is that he's an old guy and he's doing old guy stuff. The main reason I don't like this book is that I think it's boring. I don't like where the plot goes. It does have some interesting Dark Tower elements, but overall, it's just not a very strong standalone in his catalog. But again, the main character, I think his name is Ralph. Ralph Roberts, some alliteration for you. Yeah, Ralph Roberts, he's fine. He's not terrible, but he's not great either. I know a lot of people do like this book, so it would be interesting down in the comments below. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my take here. And just for all of these picks, let me know. Just blast me in the comments if I'm dead wrong here. But anyway, Ralph Roberts, a little meh. Then we come to some examples where I think the books are actually pretty good or even great at times, despite their main character. And it's not to say that I hate these main characters. It's just that when I think about these books, the main protagonists of the story are not why I enjoy the book. So the first example that I can think of personally is Salem's Lot. Now, I do really enjoy this book. This is my second favorite vampire novel of all time. My first one, if you want to know, is Fever Dream by my boy George R.R. Martin. But Salem's Lot is a close second. I'm not really a vampire fan, but Stephen King does really get me in the mood for vampires for this one, especially the horror side. Fever Dream, less horror. Salem's Lot, definite horror. And I will say the strong aspect of this is the horror, is the atmosphere, are the villains, the vampires themselves, kind of the dread and the doom of this book. One of the weaker points is the characters, especially the main protagonist, I would argue, is Ben Mears. He is just fine. Again, I think he's a writer character, if I remember correctly. So this is his second published book in 1975, and he's already starting with that trope. He gets it much better with Jack Torrance in The Shining, the following, or 2 years after. Anyway, Salem's Lot, I think it's good despite of the main protagonist of Ben Mears. Ben Mears, again, he's not terrible. He's serviceable. That's the kind of the word that I would use for a lot of these. Like, he's there kind of just, to get the plot moving along. He kind of comes back to this town and, he starts to realize that it's run by vampires now. But yeah, he's fine, but there's so many other great things about this book that are so much better than Ben Mears, if that makes any sense. So I think this book is actually good despite of the main protagonist, who is a bit mid. Kind of the same concept with the main character being fine, but I actually like the idea and the concept and the plot of this book much more than the actual protagonist would be The Running Man. And again, we have a character named Ben Richards. So maybe Stephen King just needs to stop writing characters named Ben. Change the name and then make the character better. I don't know. But anyway, The Running Man is a Richard Bachman novel. And it's a very interesting one because it's actually, well, in the time that he wrote it, it was futuristic. It takes place in the year 2025. I still need to see the remake. I think that'll be an interesting movie. But anyway, talking about the book here. And the main character of Ben Richards, he's fine, nothing to run home about. But I think the more interesting thing about this book is actually the dystopian society that the characters live in, and the horrific game show that Ben Richards decides to be put on by himself. Basically, the running game, or the Running Man game, is a dystopian game show where you go on there and you have to run away and stay away from people that are actively trying to kill you. And the longer that you stay alive, the more money gets sent to your family. Until you die, of course. But the catch is, if you stay alive for, I think, 30 days or so, you get $1 billion. So a lot of people have tried. No one has succeeded, but Ben thinks that he can do it. But anyway, Ben is a bit meh. Like, he's not a great character. He's fine, but it's the other things about the book that I like more than the actual protagonist. I also have an example of a character that I liked in the first book that they were in, but with subsequent sequels, I liked their character a lot less. And that would be Gwendy's Button Box. Now, if I was just going off of this first book, the first time I read it, she would probably go into underrated, because I think in this first book, she is a great character, great story. I really loved this novella. But with the sequels, Gwendy Magic Feather, which Stephen King actually didn't write, and then Gwendy's Final Task, those books just make me like Gwendy less and less. And I won't say she's an overrated character, because I don't think a lot of people rate her that highly to begin with. But with those two books, I think she's kind of just turned into a mid Stephen King character. This one, I think she's great, but then with knowing what her story leads to, she's just kind of ended up mid-tier for me personally. Another Stephen King character that has another trilogy, that he's the main character, obviously, in the title of the series. I forgot where I was going with this, but anyway, I'm talking about Mr. Mercedes, the Bill Hodges trilogy. Of course, I'm talking about Bill Hodges himself. I know a lot of people probably love Bill Hodges, but for me, he was always just an okay protagonist. Maybe a bit higher than some of these other characters, mainly probably just because I like at least two of these books a lot better. End of Watch is still one of my least favorite Stephen King books. But anyway, in Mr. Mercedes, he's serviceable. He's pretty good, especially like at the start of the book where we kind of get him at his low point. Won't spoil anything, but at that, like seeing him go from that to where he is at the end of the book, it's an interesting arc, I guess. But in the second book, in the Bill Hodges trilogy, he's barely even in the book, so it's kind of an interesting contrast there. But anyway, I think his character overall is decent. I would argue the strong suit of this series is kind of the plot and the fast pace, which is a bit of a departure from a lot of his more slow burn horror books. This is kind of a not super fast paced, but by Stephen King standards, it's a bit faster paced, and it's more on the thriller detective side. So it was fun to see King's kind of step into those writing shoes. But overall, Bill Hodges himself, he's fine as a character, but never really even my favorite aspect of the books. We also get a character that, again, another writer character. I'm just realizing this now. He just has so many writer characters. But anyway, it's a writer character that I think gets outshined by his companion, if you will, or alter ego. I might be giving it away with that. But I'm, of course, talking about the Dark Half. And the main character in question is Thad Beaumont, and his alter ego is George Stark. Hopefully I'm getting that in the right order. But anyway, I couldn't even really tell you a thing, like an actual thing about Thad Beaumont, besides the fact that he's a writer. Like, that's all that I remember about him. And of course, I think the more interesting aspect of this book is the fact that he does have an alter ego writer in him named George Stark, and then he literally comes to life. That's the more intriguing part of this book, kind of the villain aspect. George Stark is come to life and he's killing people, and everyone, including the cops, suspect Thad Beaumont of killing all these people. So that's a really fun part about this book. But Thad Beaumont in and of himself isn't that intriguing, at least for me personally. And again, another writer character. Stephen King has he has a lot better writer characters. I keep bringing up Jack Torrance, but there's other people as well. The Dark Half, Thad Beaumont, pretty mid. And I'm going to end the video on two relatively new kid characters in Stephen King's bibliography. Both of these are not necessarily the reason I don't like these books, but again, Stephen King has so many great kid characters, especially early on in his career. I think these two kids just don't live up to what he wrote in the past. The first one I'll talk about is definitely one of King's most overrated books, especially in terms of his newer books, and that would be The Institute. A lot of people love this book, but for me, I actually really enjoyed the first chapter of this book where we kind of just get this random guy for 30 pages and then he doesn't show up for 300 pages. I'm like, I wanted more of that guy. But then, obviously we get to the main bulk of this book, which is a lot of kid characters. The main protagonist of this book is Luke Ellis. At the very beginning of the book, his parents are killed and he's kidnapped and taken to this kind of secret, like, government something, and they want to basically test out his supernatural powers, and he's there with a bunch of other kids that also have these weird supernatural powers. And overall, Luke is he's fine. He's not great. He's not terrible. He's definitely nowhere near as good as, obviously, like Carrie or Danny Torrance, The Losers Club, The Boys in the Body. Like, he has so many great kid characters. The kid characters in here they're just not as good. And I don't know if that's just because Stephen King can't tap into how kids from this time period sound like, because obviously he was probably able to figure out what kids sounded like back then. But this is like 2010s, 2020s kids. It's just like, I don't know, it just feels a little off. Anyway, Luke Ellis, he's not the main reason why I don't love this book. There's a lot of stuff that, again, like I really liked that main guy, and then we don't see him for hundreds of pages. And then the ending is just kind of weird. I didn't really love the ending. But anyway, I think this book is slightly overrated, but Luke himself, he's fine. Meh. And the last book I have to talk about is yet again another kid character. He's definitely not the reason why I don't like this book, and you'll understand why probably right when I show you the book. Anyway, the book I'm talking about is Fairy Tale. And the kid character in question, the main character of the book, basically is Charlie Reed. And yes, I did have to look at the back of the book. I do have a dedicated book review if you guys want to check this one out. But anyway, this one is a standalone fantasy written by Stephen King. No shit, Jake. Pretty sure this is the newest book on the list. But anyway, the main reason why I don't like this book isn't because of the main character. And in fact, the first couple of 100 pages, the relationship that he has with an older protagonist is very heartwarming, very endearing, and the first 200 pages of this book are amazing. It's kind of the middle chunk of this book and the second half of the book where Charlie actually goes into this portal fantasy, because this is kind of a portal fantasy thing. It's all of that stuff in this weird fantasy world that I don't like. And it's not necessarily Charlie himself in the fantasy world. It's Stephen King, like what he decides to write in said fantasy world. I won't spoil anything, but it just he sets it up so well, and it just falls flat, at least in my opinion. So Charlie isn't the reason I don't like this book. It's definitely the direction that the book goes in. Charlie for me is definitely an okay part of the book, and he's definitely not a kid character that I think about on the same level as The Losers Club, The Boys in the Body, Danny Torrance. Like, he's definitely he's not the worst kid character either, because he's got a couple of those. But anyway, Charlie is just kind of, he's mid. He's good. He's fine. All right, so those are 10 Stephen King protagonists that I think are just a little meh, just a little mid, just a tad, just a little mid, a little dash of mid for you. But anyway, so it's kind of contrast between like characters that I think are underrated, that I think deserve more attention, and characters that I think are overrated, that get too much attention. These ones, they're just kind of in the middle. They're fine. Now, will I eventually do like a just straight up top 10 Stephen King protagonists? I don't know if I've done that yet before. I have to go look. Comment down below if I've done that before. I don't even remember. But anyway, if I didn't do that, I'll try to do that. I know one video that I will eventually do this month is a Dreamcatcher book review. And that book is a book. and I will review it. And of course, if you've got any comments for future Stephen King videos that you want to leave down below, definitely do that. Also, just in general, do you agree with my picks here? Do you agree that most of these characters are in fact mid, or do you disagree and think that they're either really bad or really great? Comment down below and we'll chat about it. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Stay subscribed for more content. I try to post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, especially Friday here on Stephen King Fridays. And of course, I got the Book of Summer Discord down below, where we've always got tons of buddy reads and read-alongs, including the Stephen King Book Club. The last month of the year, we're going to be reading Dreamcatcher. I've also got my Patreon link down below if you want to go support me there for as little as $1 a month, and my Amazon wishlist if you'd like to buy me a book. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a fantastic day.